Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into something lots of you might be thinking about, maybe even dreaming about, moving to Portugal.
Hmm.
Specifically, we're going to peel back the layers on, well, the two big hotspots for expats, Porto and Lisbon.
Right, the main choices.
Yeah. Our mission, basically, is to pull out the really crucial stuff from a detailed expat guide to help you figure out the differences, the practical things between these two great
The
cities.
big one.
It is. It kind of comes down to what are you after? Is it like saving money and getting that real authentic culture feel? Or maybe it's more about international jobs and that big city buzz.
And what's really striking, looking at the sources, is just how many people are flocking to Portugal right now. I mean, we're talking record numbers for 2024, 2025.
Wow.
And for so many of them, that core decision, Porto versus Lisbon, it really does hinge on these things. Daily life, jobs, what you want long term. It's not just picking a place, it's choosing a whole lifestyle.
Okay, so let's start where, most people probably start when they think about a big move, the money. What's the actual cost of living situation?
Mhm.
The big headline here for you seems pretty clear. Porto usually comes out, 20 to 30% cheaper than Lisbon?
It's right. It's a really noticeable gap, and it actually seems to have widened a bit in 2024.
Okay.
To put a number on it, the guide suggests someone in Porto might save around, say, 760 euros a month compared to Lisbon
With the same lifestyle.
for basically the same standard of living, yeah. And no surprise, housing is the main reason. Lisbon rents are consistently like 28 to 38% higher.
That's a huge chunk of change right there. Can you give us some maybe concrete examples of those rent figures?
Sure, so think about a one-bedroom place, city center. In Porto, you're looking at an average around 1,033.
Okay.
But jump to Lisbon, same kind of place. It's more like $389. And if you need more space, like a family with a three-bedroom, it's about 1,909 in Porto versus 2,634 in Lisbon. So, yeah, these aren't small differences. They really change your monthly budget.
And it's not just the massive things like rent, is it? What about the day-to-day stuff? Those costs add up too.
Oh, absolutely. They really compound the difference.
Yeah.
Like, just grabbing a simple meal out, it's usually 10, maybe 30% more in Lisbon. An inexpensive lunch might be €10 in Porto, but 13 in Lisbon.
Right.
Groceries, too, you generally save 5 to 25% in Porto. Even the little things, like your daily coffee.
Yeah.
A cappuccino is just under €1 in Porto, but closer to 2.50 in Lisbon. That's like a 25% jump for your morning caffeine fix.
Okay, I'm already calculating my potential cappuccino savings in Porto. So looking forward, are these rent prices, are they calming down at all? Or is demand still pushing them up?
Well, the forecast for 2025 still suggests pressure on rents. There are government caps, around 2%, which might help a bit. But interestingly, Porto actually saw bigger percentage increases in rent in 2024, about 12% versus Lisbon's 8%.
Oh, really? What does it mean?
It doesn't necessarily mean Porto's getting more expensive overall, but it does suggest demand is really heating up there. More people are discovering its value, its appeal.
Got it.
So bottom line, for a single person, you can live comfortably in Porto on maybe $1,200 to $1,500 a month. Lisbon, you probably need more like $1,500 to $1,800.
So it's not just cheaper, it's a different kind of lifestyle value proposition.
Exactly, a kind of lifestyle dividend, if you prioritize that value.
Okay, building on that, let's shift to jobs. Career prospects. Portugal's tech scene, as you mentioned, is really taking off. How do the opportunities compare, particularly for, international folks?
Yeah, the tech sector is projected to grow quite a bit, maybe 15% in 2024. That means a lot of new jobs.
And Lisbon's the main hub.
Lisbon really dominates, yes. It's the country's primary tech center. It's got something like 60% of Portugal's, nearly 5,000 startups? Plus, all the big global names have major offices there. Microsoft, Google, Amazon, IBM. They're projecting over 8,000 tech roles just in Lisbon for 2024.
And salaries reflect that.
Generally, yeah. Software developers in Lisbon typically earn between, say, 35,000 euros, 60,000 a year.
Okay, so Lisbon's the powerhouse. But does Porto just, follow along, or does it have its own tech focus?
Oh, it definitely has its own identity. Porto's tech scene is smaller, maybe a quarter of the national startups,
Right.
but it really shines in specific areas. Things like automotive tech, digitalizing manufacturing. You've got big players like Bosch, Continental, Siemens, Critical Tech Works working with BMW, plus successful local companies like Mindera.
So more specialized. And the salaries there.
A bit lower, reflecting the cost of living too. Developers in Porto might earn between €30,000 and €55,000. That lines up with that sort of 10–15% difference we see across other sectors too.
Right, makes sense. It sounds like both have a pretty lively startup culture, though. How's the funding situation? Yeah.
Strong. Portuguese companies overall raised nearly 900 million in 2024. AI startups got a big chunk of that, like 37%.
Interesting.
Fintech, health tech also growing fast. And both cities have great support systems. Startup Lisboa and Lisbon, UP Tech and Porto, they're really important for new businesses.
But funding access might be better in Lisbon.
Generally, yes. Lisbon just has a deeper pool of venture capital firms like Portugal Ventures, Indico Capital Partners.
Yeah.
So potentially more access to, bigger funding rounds if you're based there.
Gotcha. And what about remote workers? Lots of people looking for that lifestyle. How do co-working spaces compare?
The infrastructure is really good in both places now. Lisbon co-working spots average maybe €150 a month. But you can find premium ones for 200, €300 easily.
Okay.
Porto's usually a bit cheaper, maybe around €100 a month on average. Places like Porto EO offer great deals, like 80 to 120.
And the community aspect for nomads.
Ah, that's a big difference. Lisbon has a huge digital nomad community. We're talking over 20,000 members on meetup groups, weekly events with hundreds of people. It's very active.
Porto less so.
Smaller, yeah. More intimate, maybe. Depends what you're looking for in a community.
Okay, let's switch gears to property. Buying a place either to live in or as an investment. What should people know about each city?
Right, real estate.
Hmm.
Still pretty attractive for international buyers, even with some rule changes.
Mm-hmm.
What really stands out for investors is the rental yield. Porto consistently gives better returns, usually in the range of, say, 5.8% to over 6%.
That's pretty good.
It is. Lisbon's average is lower, more like 3.8%. So if your main goal is rental income, Porto looks like the stronger bet.
And just the purchase price itself.
Also lower in Porto, averages around 3,900 times per square meter, whereas Lisbon is closer to 5,000.
Now, I know there was some big changes with the Golden Visa recently affecting real estate in cities like these. What's the key thing listeners need to understand about that?
Yeah, that's super important. Basically, since October 2023, you can't get the Golden Visa just by buying residential property in Lisbon, Porto, or other coastal areas anymore.
So what are the options now?
Well, you need to go down other routes, like investing at least $500,000 in approved investment funds, or making a cultural donation, or starting a business that creates jobs.
Right.
And the other big thing to know is the backlog. There are like 50,000 applications stuck in the system nationwide.
Wow, that's huge. How long are the waits?
Can't be years, honestly. 5, sometimes even 7 years. But there was a crucial rule change in 2024.
Oh, what's that?
Your countdown clock for citizenship eligibility now starts when you apply, not when you finally get approved. Yeah. Which is, a big relief for people stuck in that queue.
That is a big deal. So assuming someone chooses a city and wants to buy, can you give us an idea of specific neighborhoods and what they might cost?
Sure. Neighborhood makes a huge difference, obviously.
Yeah.
In Porto, you've got, say, Foz do Douro that's premium, coastal, maybe 5,700 per square meter. Then there's Seo Fica, trendy, artistic, more like 3,900. Or for something more affordable near the beach, Matosinhos is popular, under 200 dono per square meter.
And Lisbon?
Much higher. Generally, yes.
Yeah.
Prime spots like Príncipe Real can easily go over 7,000 per square meter. Areas like Estrela or Campo de Urique are often in that 7,000 to 7,200 range. Big difference.
Definitely. What about getting a mortgage if you're not a resident? Is that doable?
Yeah, it's pretty reasonable, actually. Non-residents can often borrow 65 to 75% of the property value.
Okay.
Interest rates stabilized a bit in late 2024, around 3.4% for variable rates. Fixed rates for, say, 5 years were maybe 4% to 6%. Lots of banks work with foreign buyers.
But you need a decent deposit.
Absolutely. You'll need at least 25%, more likely 30-35% upfront. And the market, still expected to grow steadily, maybe 5-6% a year through 2025.
Okay, let's move beyond the money and property. What about the actual life there? The social scene for expats fitting in? How different are the communities?
The community size is probably the biggest differentiator. Lisbon has a huge international population, nearly 120,000 foreign residents. It feels very cosmopolitan.
Lots going on.
Lots of expat services events, easy to meet people from everywhere. Porto's expat community is smaller, around 46,000 maybe.
So more intimate.
Yeah, that's the word people use. It often feels like it fosters closer connections, maybe makes it a bit easier to actually integrate into the local Portuguese culture. There's perhaps less of that expat bubble.
Interesting point. For families moving, schools are obviously critical. How do they compare for international options?
Lisbon definitely has more variety there. Loads of choices, American schools, British schools like St. Julian's, French, German. Fees generally range from, say, 5,000 up to 25,000 a year.
And Porto?
Fewer options, only about 4 main international schools. But it does have the very prestigious Oporto British School. It's been around forever, since 1894.
Wow.
And it's the only place in northern Portugal offering the IB diploma. Fees are competitive too, maybe 4,300 to 20,000 euros. So less choice, but high quality.
What about learning the language? How easy is it to find classes and practice?
Both cities have good infrastructure for learning Portuguese. Lisbon schools might average around 240-ish a week for intensive courses. Porto's similar, maybe slightly cheaper.
And ways to practice?
Yeah, things like the Speak a Language Exchange program are popular in both. Interestingly, the Tandem app shows way more active users in Lisbon, like 850 versus 190 in Porto.
What do you make of that?
Could just reflect Lisbon's larger, more transient expat scene again. Maybe in Porto, people find more informal ways to practice within that tighter community.
So, boiling it down, what's the key takeaway on social integration?
I think it's this. Porto's smaller scale can make it easier to build deeper local ties, maybe feel more integrated. Lisbon's huge expat network is great, but it can sometimes make it too easy to just stay within that bubble, less pressure to really learn the language and culture.
Right.
But at either city, really breaking into Portuguese social circles takes time and effort. It's a very family and community-focused culture.
Okay, let's talk quality of life, daily living stuff. Beyond the money and jobs, what makes each city nice to live in?
Well, healthcare is a big plus across Portugal. The country ranks really well globally, like 23rd.
That's impressive.
Yeah. And as a legal resident, you get access to the public system, the SNS, with really low copays, like 5 to 20 euro for appointments.
And private options.
Plenty of those, too. Faster access to specialists, more English speakers usually. Consultations might be 50 to 200 euro, and insurance is pretty reasonable, maybe 400 to 1,000 euros a year.
What about safety? That's always high on people's lists when moving.
Portugal overall is incredibly safe. It ranks 7th globally on the Peace Index for 2024.
7th? Wow.
Yeah, it's remarkable. Both cities feel very safe. Porto actually scores slightly higher on safety perception indices, but honestly, the difference is marginal. Crime stats are higher in Lisbon, but you have to account for the larger population and tourism.
Yeah.
Bottom line, you'll feel secure in either place.
Okay, good to know. Climate can be a real deal breaker, though. How different is the weather?
It's definitely different. Lisbon gets more sunshine, around 300 days a year, and summers are warmer, averaging maybe 28 Celsius.
Nice.
Porto's a bit cooler in summer, maybe 25 degrees thanks to the Atlantic influence. But the big difference is winter rain. Porto gets significantly more, like 170 millimeters in January, compared to Lisbon's 110 millimeter.
So if you hate rain?
Lisbon might be your preference, yeah. Air quality is also slightly better in Porto, generally, though both are pretty good.
And the cultural vibe, nightlife, how do they compare?
Lisbon definitely has that more vibrant late-night reputation. Areas like Barro Alto with hundreds of bars, clubs open really late. It's got a very international party feel.
And Porto?
Porto's vibe is more intimate, maybe traditional, really centered around its amazing wine culture, fado music, great traditional food. Nightlife tends to wind down earlier, might suit families or professionals a bit more.
Different strokes.
Exactly. Both have fantastic museums, too, but they kind of reflect the cities. Lisbon's Gulbenkian feels more international. Porto's Serralves has more of that regional artistic soul.
Okay, last section. Let's talk practicalities, the nitty-gritty of moving. Paperwork, bureaucracy, future stuff. What do people need to brace themselves for?
Bureaucracy, yes.
Yeah.
Look, the Portuguese system can be slow. AIMA, the agency handling residency permits now, has a massive backlog, over 400,000 cases nationwide.
Ooh.
Yeah. So the good news is they've automatically extended visas and permits until June 30, 2025 to cope. But the key thing is this delay affects everywhere. You won't get processed faster in Porto than in Lisbon or vice versa. It's systemic.
So patience is required. What about easier things like opening a bank account or getting internet set up?
Those are usually much smoother, thankfully. Banks like Actival Bank or Millennium BCP are pretty expat-friendly, good English service, easy setup.
Right.
The absolute first, most crucial step, though, is getting your NIF number, your tax ID. Usually get that same day at a Finanzas office. Get that immediately. It unlocks everything else.
Good tip. And internet.
Excellent in both cities. Fiber coverage is nearly everywhere. You can get super fast 1 GB plans for around 40 to 60 euro a month. Very reliable.
What if you're moving with pets? Any major hurdles there?
It follows the standard EU rules, so usually manageable. Porto often gets called particularly pet-friendly. It feels a bit more relaxed, and you've got accessible dog beaches like Matosinhos.
Okay.
Lisbon has more vets, maybe being bigger. Finding pet-friendly housing is possible in both, but expect landlords might ask for an extra deposit, maybe 200 and 500 euro.
Hmm.
Anecdotally, Porto might be slightly more flexible there.
Okay. Looking beyond the immediate move, what about big infrastructure projects or tax changes people should have on their radar?
There's some big stuff happening. The huge 5 billion high-speed rail project between Porto and Lisbon is key. It'll cut travel time down to just 1 hour, 15 minutes eventually.
That's a game changer.
Totally changes the dynamic. And Porto's getting massive investment in its metro system too. Over €1 billion in 2024 for new lines. Even a hydrogen-powered metrobus. Lisbon's airport is also expanding capacity significantly, aiming for 50 million passengers by 2027. And there are plans for a whole new airport further out by 2034. Porto's airport has also seen huge growth, up 22% since 2019. So lots of investment in connectivity.
And tax policy? Any major shifts?
Yes, a big one. The original non-habitual resident NHR scheme ended January 1st, 2024.
Right. Heard about that. What replaced it?
It's replaced by a much narrower scheme, sometimes called NHR 2.0 or IICI. It's really targeted now at highly qualified people in scientific research, innovation, that kind of thing. They can get a flat 20% tax rate.
So much more specific.
Very specific. And if you might qualify and were resident in 2024, there's a deadline, March 15th, 2025, to apply for that tax year. So important to check eligibility quickly.
Good to know. And lastly, that digital nomad visa we touched on, still popular.
Yeah, still growing people. Over 2,600 issued. The income requirement is creeping up, though, around 3,480 or in a month now. Madeira's got that whole nomad village thing going on, too. For access, Lisbon has the better direct flights to places like Madeira. Porto offers maybe a more affordable mainland base with good digital setup. Depends on the nomad's priorities.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this all up. After this deep dive, what does it really mean for you, the listener, thinking about Portugal? It seems like it boils down to a pretty strategic choice, right? If you're really focused on value, getting that authentic Portuguese experience, maybe stretching your budget further, Porto seems like the strong contender. You've got those significant cost savings, 27% lower, better rental yields if you're investing, a growing specialized tech scene, good international schools that are reasonably priced, and that smaller community vibe, which might help with real integration.
Plus the infrastructure improvements coming.
Exactly. Its appeal is only growing.
But on the flip side, if your main goal is hitting the ground running with international career options, and you love that truly cosmopolitan big city feel, then Lisbon is probably it.
Right. The job market there is just bigger, especially for major tech companies, often with slightly higher salaries to match.
And you've got way more international schools, a huge, diverse expat network right off the bat. Plus, the weather's generally better, the nightlife's buzzing, and the global flight connections are hard to beat.
Even if it costs more.
Even if it costs more. For many, especially career-focused people, that trade-off makes sense.
And important to remember, both cities share those bureaucratic delays. So applying early for residency is key, wherever you choose.
Absolutely. But zooming out, Portugal's overall story is still incredibly positive, isn't it?
Yeah, seems like it.
You've got ongoing EU investment, that booming tech sector, infrastructure getting better all the time. The country's really building long-term value.
So whether you lean towards Porto's affordability and sort of cultural depth or Lisbon's opportunities and global buzz,
expats in both places get amazing healthcare, that incredible safety seventh globally. That's worth repeating, a really welcoming culture, and still costs that are way below other major Western European capitals, like 30–50% lower.
it's a compelling package overall.
It really is. Which I guess brings us to the final thought for you listening in. Whether you're seriously planning a move or just fascinated by these global trends, how much does that authentic cultural immersion really weigh for you, personally, against things like global connectivity or specific career tracks? When you imagine your ideal life abroad, what's the factor that truly tips the scale for you? Something to ponder.